Greetings, traveler. I am Sir Nox, the teller of tales. Would you like to hear one? Well, this one is called DM Absolutely Loves Targeting Me to Die. How fun! This'll be a very short one. We were in a bandit hideout fighting to save some people held captive. There were 5 of us, and the bandits were made up of 5 DMPCs, and a dozen undead archers controlled by a single DMPC, which was mathematically impossible to have that many undead controlled, and none of the DMPCs had any spell slots used up at the start, so it was cheesed from the start. But this always happens. So all the DMPCs have initiatives above 20, because that's realistic, and the undead are middle of the pack. After I cast one spell to prepare for our long combat, the undead archers suddenly all turn to me, and our DM says, "Okay, that'll be 12 longbow attacks towards you." Keeping in mind, all 5 of us were visible and in range, and it wasn't even close to the biggest threat there. But a reasonable DM would have split up the shots amongst all of us. Regardless, only a bit over half hit me and I lived. Back to the top of the order. A DMPC targets me again with a spell to do a bunch more damage, even though there were other more dangerous and strategically better targets. And then a second DMPC rushes towards me, takes 2 attacks of opportunity, and then attacks me twice, including 2 uses of a boost, like Divine Smite but not a Paladin, to finally knock me out. I haven't even gotten to do anything interesting yet, and I was down while everyone else in my party hadn't even been attacked yet. I ended up surviving the encounter, but I was fairly pissed about how this went. This isn't the first time I've been specifically targeted, and our DM has said it out loud that he's targeting me, but it never happens to anyone else. It's always me that gets targeted. This isn't the first horror story from this group, but thankfully it might be my last. Due to the other obligations, I have a legitimate reason to leave the group without anyone getting their feelings hurt. So long and good riddance. Wow, I wonder, I don't know, I feel like there's more context to the story that's needed. Why are you being targeted and nobody else? And yet you're aware of it and everyone knows. What happened? Maybe you're a very good player, they expect more out of you and that's why he's going after you. Or maybe you just upset him and he's being a little bit of a dingleberry. Either way, it sounds annoying. Unfortunately, some DMs like to play very hard battle games where you die almost instantly. It's kind of like their version of a Dark Souls, but not everyone's into that. Seems like you're not. Some are though. Not me. Our next story is called Go Give Us Nothing. Compared to the rest of the threads, this isn't really a whole story, and I feel guilty for even feeling this way. But I just really need to vent about a player in my online D&D server. Well, we're here to listen. Go ahead. Let's call this player Wall. Wall is the embodiment of the "I love her lack of energy, go girl, give us nothing" meme, only as a dude and not as an endearing. His character introductions are nothing more than name, race, class, which is a valid introduction. Not everyone roleplays, and some people are more interested in rolling dice and killing monsters. Problem is, Wall shows no enthusiasm for combat either. His character's combat abilities are never seen because all he does is say, "I move and attack." He doesn't specify which creature he's targeting, nor does he move his token. He just says, "I move and attack." The DM has to clarify everything for him, but if we offer suggestions for his character to make, Wall agrees with no fuss. He's played a sorcerer who never once used metamagic, and a wizard who never cast any reaction spells, such as counterspell or absorb elements or shield. When we ask whether his character has those spells prepared, he says yes. He'll then add, "Why do you ask?" Wall is on mute 99.99% of the game, and we eventually learn it's because he's at work while he's playing, so he can't talk. Okay, that explains his lack of attention. Maybe he'll have better focus when he's not working. No such luck. On a weekend, when Wall wasn't working, he played a cleric who cast Bless on everyone. Except another player's cleric literally just did that in the same round. The DM told him he could take a different action. We then spent 5 minutes in silence waiting before Wall realized the DM was talking to him. This was because the DM addressed Wall by his character's name, and it took him that long to realize, "Oh right, that's me." Wall would eventually join a long-running campaign that the DM advertised would have a serious character-driven narrative and will focus on personal growth at all falls, but will have epic loot. This campaign will take us from level 5 all the way to level 20 and possibly even beyond. Slots filled up so fast and I only barely made it on the list myself. The campaign lasted well over a year and we were having a blast. Our DM gave each of our characters a big moment during the campaign as well as a unique home brewing magic item tailored to our characters. All except for Walls, who got a generic legendary sword. It was also noticeable that the DM was skipping Walls' character during pivotal story moments, and so I asked the DM about it in private. I heard the excitement drain from her voice when she told me that Wall just wanted to hit things, level up, and get loot and gold. Note that it's not Wall's character, but Wall himself. He did not care what the other people in the party did. He didn't want to develop his character beyond the numbers on their sheet, which he himself couldn't be bothered to remember. I say this because we had a couple of weeks where we weren't able to play and we all agreed to refresh ourselves with each other's characters. During Wall's turn, he declared the final barbarian totem was the one that gave you flight because he wanted a character who could fly. Ladies and gentlemen, Wall was playing an Aarakocra, and it wasn't as if his Aarakocra had clipped wings or a lingering injury or anything of the sort. No, Wall just forgot his character could fly from the get-go. The thing is, Wall isn't disruptive in-game or out, he's just there. He doesn't complain or whine or argue with the DM or talk over others. He takes everything in stride and doesn't question rulings or decisions. But I legitimately can't tell if it's because he's a chill dude or if it's because he just doesn't care. He doesn't join in and out of game conversations on the server or contribute to anything beyond the occasional GIF reaction or emoji or meme post. He at least says thank you to the DMs for running together with everyone else, so there's that, I guess. We can't boot him from games because no one has the right to impose a playstyle on others. Hopefully getting this all out will help me get over my frustrations over such a trivial matter. Well, hopefully that's all. Hopefully you've been able to vent and you can move on. Because it sounds like, yeah, he might be annoying to you in their playstyle, but overall it's how they want to play the game. So work around it. If they're not causing problems and it's just an annoyance, then just understand that when you interact in game that it's not going to really be up to you to develop much with that character. Just let them go off and hit and bash and run away and don't expect any strategy or help or role-playing from that character. All will be fine, apparently, but I do understand your frustration. That would bother me myself. But it is what it is. Not a big deal. Have fun. Our next story is titled, Player Wants UA Content. I say no. They proceed to play Boundaries Chicken. Oh, a measuring contest. For those familiar with D&D 5th edition, the content in question is the final version of Mystic, WOTC, published in the UA. I took a brief look at the content and initially I thought, yeah, seems fine, so I okayed it. Keep in mind that the content is for a future campaign that is merely hypothetical. We were still months away from the end of the current campaign and I had other things on my mind. A week passes and I'm in a creative mood. So I go over the notes I've been making for the new campaign ideas and remember the UA content. I do a deep dive and find huge problems with the class and its features that I can't really reconcile without fixing it myself. I bring this up to the player, highlighting the incredibly problematic 11th level feature and all the ambiguity about its use. They offer to rewrite it and wanting to avoid an argument over a hypothetical character in a hypothetical campaign, I agree. What they come back with is essentially the same feature that can be abused in the same way. At this point, I've pretty much figured out all the ways this class and its features can be abused. They're pretty outrageous, and I'm totally opposed to using it without edits made by me. I offer to rewrite the class. Players' response is that they think the class is fine as is and would rather not change anything other than adding their 11th level feature rewrite. I say okay, but that I won't allow it in-game IDM. They say, okay, case closed. Minutes pass and they come back as if they hadn't agreed to what I said and instead begin talking about how they are going to rewrite it. I'm not sure how to react to this since they've already said they think it's fine and I'm generally opposed to the idea of players writing homebrew for their own use. I tell them to feel free if that's something they enjoy, but I'm going to stick to what I said previously. As an aside, this player 1, has always had problematic tendencies from the beginning of our 5th edition campaign. When I first decided I wanted to DM exclusively 5th edition, as opposed to other systems, He and another player, player 2, were opposed to the idea and spent a lot of time listing all of D&D's problems. I told them if they didn't like 5th edition, that's okay. We would be friends, and even if they didn't want to play in my campaign, that would be fine. So I started a campaign without them, and they claimed I was excluding them because they weren't invited. In the end, we started a campaign with the entire friend group. I can't claim I was always the best DM. I was a novice DM, a novice human person, despite being in my mid-20s. I was stupid and ignorant, but aware of it and trying to grow as a person and a DM. Despite their complaints of exclusion, it was clear they weren't on board with my decision to run 5th edition even after we began a brand new campaign just for them. I had to put up with their constant moaning about various rules like AC calculation and the need to provide VSM for spells, and their attempts to power game as a means of pooping on the system I loved for about a year before they realized I wasn't going back to their preferred TTRPG. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Eventually, player 2 got better, but player 1 didn't. There were even some hints that he had considered inflicting me physical harm over the anger he felt toward me. I pretended not to notice and even blamed myself. I wanted to play D&D and wanted friends. However, from that point forward, I became very cautious about how I interacted with both of these players. Instead of getting murdered or assaulted, I endured more than 5 years of constant passive-aggressive complaints. If there was ever a rule player 1 didn't like, he'd complain about it in a nonchalant way anytime it came up, and if it didn't come up, he'd find ways to bring it up so he could complain. That kind of thing ground me down, and by the time this story takes place, I'm constantly thinking about ending things with player 1 and 2 and getting a fresh start without either one of them. By the way, they are also best friends. At this point, the years of being in charge as a DM, as well as years of therapy, have given me respect for myself that I never had before. I started putting up with less shit. With all of this in mind, please read on. Returning to the story. I can already tell this is going to be a whole thing, so I tell player 1 to do whatever he wants, but my decision wouldn't change. He then starts asking me what specifically needs to be reworked. I tell him I'm not going to invest my time and energy into that since he already declined my offer to do so. I also tell him that I am not going to engage with him on this topic any longer since I want to focus on other things. D&D isn't my entire life. His response is that he's going to do it regardless, so I should just participate, implying he intends to play the class in a campaign I DM no matter what I say. I stop replying to his DMs, quit Discord, and disable notifications. The following day, I open Discord and check my messages while watching Netflix on my iPad. You know, ADHD things. A PM from a friend alerts me to the fiasco taking place in a server chat. I have notifications off. I skim the past several hours or so of one-sided drama and my eyes kind of just glaze over. None of this surprises me. I honestly kind of expected it. I focus on the reaction of my friends instead of the shit-talking. One friend called player 1 on his BS. The other friend, player 2, makes a bunch of wild assumptions and wants to take control of the situation by forcing a confrontation. I state that, in no uncertain terms, I'm not upset, angry, or hurt. I'm simply not going to participate in a discussion I considered finished. I also clearly state that if my boundaries continue to be disrespected, I would take that to mean I can't expect respect from them and I would immediately stop DMing. Player 1 accuses me of holding the game hostage. Player 2 gaslights me by stating that doing things in anger is never a good idea, among other things. True to my word, I announce the D&D is cancelled. More gaslighting happens, including the epic gaslight that gaslighting isn't happening, so I let both players know that I'm blocking them until I feel my boundaries are being respected. Days pass. Player 2 is contacting me repeatedly and ignoring my clear statements that I will not talk to them until they respect my boundaries. Good for you. I like that you took a stand. I block them on everything. I remember the danger of physical violence that these two players represent together and resolve to move back in with my parents for my own safety. Yikes, that's a bit extreme. Campaign over. Friendship seemingly over, inactive, with the players that didn't take a side stuck up for me. Months pass. Player 2 sends me an email that attributes much of what happened to my mental problems and personal situations at the time. They hope I'm doing better. I block their email and continue to plan my next campaign and try to learn how to make new friends in my 30s. I'm disappointed I didn't get to finish the campaign, but proud that I managed to set boundaries and demand they be respected, something I've always struggled with. Well, good for you. anytime you feel threatened, I understand, especially physical violence that is extremely traumatic, and I can understand why you would be afraid to not want to ruffle the feathers of this person. But if someone is that outrageous to where they threaten or make you feel threatened with physical harm over a game, that is a huge red flag. In the future, you need to move on as fast as possible. I understand it can be challenging and traumatic, but it is better than staying in a situation like that, because that would just cause more issues and more fear, honestly, from your end. I'm glad things are getting better. You will find friends, obviously. You seem reasonable. And hopefully that the things you're working on will get better, because, we can always be better, all of us. So good for you for working on it, realizing it, and moving on and standing up for yourself, because you shouldn't be disrespected, and don't let people gaslight you into thinking that you're the problem when you've clearly identified them as the issue.